Hello and warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shubowale. We begin in East Africa, where the United Nations humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths and U.S. aid head Samantha Powers are in Ethiopia to push for urgent access into the conflict-hit Tigray region, where hundreds of thousands of people there face the world's worst famine crisis in 10 years. Griffiths arrived in Ethiopia on Thursday on his first trip since becoming new UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. Over 6 days, he will meet Ethiopian officials and travel to Tigray and the neighboring region of Amhara, whose fighters control parts of Tigray. Meanwhile, the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, says more than 100,000 children in Tigray are at risk of death from malnutrition.
After returning from Tigray, UNICEF spokeswoman Marixie Mercado says 1 in 2 pregnant and breastfeeding women screened in the Ethiopian northern region were acutely malnourished, leaving them and their babies prone to sickness.
As UNICEF reaches areas of Tigray that were inaccessible in past months due to insecurity, our worst fears about the health and well-being of children in that conflicted region of northern Ethiopia are being confirmed. UNICEF estimates that over 100,000 children in Tigray could suffer from life-threatening severe acute malnutrition in the next 12 months, a 10-fold increase compared to the average annual caseload.
Fighting began between the Ethiopian central government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front last November. The TPLF recaptured most of its home region in June and July, but most aid is blocked. UNICEF says children, women, and other civilians bear the scars of the conflict and trauma endured.
For example, we spoke to one young woman who is a survivor of sexual assault. She watched her grandmother get killed. She was raped by several men as she watched her 9-month-old baby being tossed around by other men. And what the doctor at IDER, at this UNICEF-supported referral center in Mekelle said, which also struck me, was that in many cases it's not the assault itself that is the worst part, but it is the psychological damage that people now have to deal with for a very long time.
The World Food Programme says it's been 2 weeks since a convoy was able to enter the Tigray regional capital, Mekelle.
It has been more than 2 weeks since a WFP-led convoy made its way to Mekelle in Tigray. A convoy of over 200 trucks is on its way now from Semera to Mekelle. This is a drop in the ocean. We need at least 100 trucks to be making their way every day into Tigray if we are to stand a chance to reverse the catastrophic situation which you have had today.
The UN urges the Ethiopian government to grant permission as well as longer visas for aid workers.
We can say that this communication equipment is only for humanitarian purposes, in a neutral, independent, impartial manner in order to carry out our operations. We need satellite phones, for example. We need that communication equipment to go in. So we don't know why that is not happening. We can only say we need this and we need those permissions, please.
Ethiopia insists that any barriers to access for aid groups to Tigray is being closely monitored by the government. And in West Africa, the UN mission in Mali says peacekeepers have repelled 2 attacks targeting its patrols. The first took place in Kidal and the second attack happened north of Douentza in the Mopti region. About 13,000 soldiers from several nations are deployed in the MINUSMA peacekeeping mission across the vast semi-arid country to help contain violence since 2012.
The UN mission in Mali reports that yesterday, peacekeepers repelled 2 attacks targeting its patrols. The first took place in Kidal, An armored vehicle was damaged, but there were no casualties. The second attack happened north of Douentza in the Mopti region, in an area where peacekeepers had defused an improvised explosive device earlier in the day. In the past 3 weeks, there have been 15 attacks against peacekeepers in Mali, including 11 that involved improvised explosive devices. 15 mission staff were injured in these attacks, which also caused extensive material damage. Despite these challenges, the mission remains committed to carrying out its mandate and reiterated its support for the full implementation of the peace agreement.
The UN Security Council has extended by 1 year an arms embargo against the Central African Republic. The vote took place on Thursday in New York among the 15 council members, with 14 votes in favor and an abstention by China. France's ambassador to the UN says the move was important as the situation in the country is worsening. The Russian representative to the UN, however, noted the UN's efforts to ease the burden of sanctions, including on mortars. The Security Council imposed the arms embargo against the country in December 2013, when mainly Muslim Salaka rebels ousted then-President Francois Bozize, prompting reprisals from mostly Christian militias. Well, to our coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic now, Kenya's health minister suspended all public gatherings over rising COVID-19 cases. Mutahi Kagwe says all public meetings planned for the next 30 days should be held virtually or cancelled. The country has in recent days recorded increased numbers of coronavirus cases. Mr. Kagwe urges Kenyans, including those who have been vaccinated, not to let their guards down. Employers have been directed to allow for remote working, except for those providing essential services. The nationwide night curfew of 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. will now be strictly enforced by the police. Worship places have been directed to strictly enforce the guidelines of a third of capacity with social distancing to prevent further spread of the virus. The minister adds that hospitals in the capital, Nairobi, are stretched out. Well, over in Senegal, the country has been experiencing its most serious surge in coronavirus cases since the pandemic began. Cemetery officials say they've seen an increase in funerals. Hospitals are straining under the load. The rise comes as the country received nearly 300,000 Johnson & Johnson doses and more than 330,000 doses of the Chinese Sinopharm vaccine in the past week and is stepping up its vaccination campaign. The new doses are more easily accessed at local vaccination points. So other stories now. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has lifted an international arrest warrant against former Ivory Coast First Lady Simone Babou. She was facing accusations of crimes against humanity committed during the country's 2010 to 2011 post-election crisis after her husband's refusal to hand over power to Alassane Ouattara, who won the 2010 election. The ICC says the evidence on which the arrest warrant for Simone Babou was based can no longer be considered sufficient. This warrant, therefore, deemed inappropriate, ceases to take effect. The court in March acquitted Laurent Gbagbo of crimes against humanity and he returned to Ivory Coast on June the 17th. The former president and President Ouattara met for the first time in a decade on Tuesday. Recent unrest in South Africa damaged hundreds of businesses, but property developers, retailers and entrepreneurs say they remain committed to the fast-growing consumer markets of its predominantly black townships. Take a look.
The water pipes and the electric wires, they took everything.
His store was one of about 3,000 which were looted during the July riot, which killed 300 people. Sparked by former President Jacob Zuma handing himself in to start a 15-month jail term for contempt of court. Despite the losses caused by the recent unrest, property developers and retailers say they remain committed to the fast-growing consumer market of its predominantly black townships, driven by rising consumer spending by the black middle class in areas that were disadvantaged for decades under the white minority rule.
We're definitely going to continue, to invest in the areas. I think strategically, we are very committed to there. I think, we feel that this is where the majority of South Africans live. By bringing malls to them, you add tremendous value to the people's lives. And we can see it, if you can take away the cost of travel for a consumer, it puts a lot of disposable income back into their pockets.
But many small business owners like Lekwathi don't have the financial elasticity to bounce back on their own. His damages come to over $27,000, around $2,000 of which he has recouped so far through private donations.
People are so generous. They are willing to, to help, and we're still waiting, for them to help because of, like now, I don't have money, I still want to hear from the government. Let's hope that, they are going to help because of this is something that was helping me to put, bread on the table.
The recent unrest was a major setback, but most are determined to take on such challenges and forge on due to the attractive profit margins still on the offer.
In February this year, the Central Bank of Nigeria released a letter addressed to banks and other financial institutions stating that dealing in cryptocurrencies and facilitating payment for cryptocurrency exchanges are now prohibited. However, the Apex Bank has revealed plans to launch its digital currency pilot scheme on October the 1st, 2021, to be able to provide the currency to the populace. The project, named Giant, will run on the Hyperledger Fabric blockchain. With its CBDC, the country will be targeting financial inclusion and remittances, a move several other central banks in the world are already exploring. Well, our guest this week, Obinna Nwunu, is active secretary of the Stakeholders in Blockchain Technology Association of Nigeria, joins us now to discuss what this means for the country's digital economy. A warm welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Just firstly, briefly, just explain to us what a CBDC is and how it's different from other forms of digital payments.
Okay, the CBDC simply means the digital currency of your local fiat, right? So what you're going to have is a digital form of the Naira. So you're not going to be carrying paper notes anymore. So the Naira is being converted digitally, so you could have it anywhere. So that's just what the CBDC means. It's the central bank digital currency. It's the digital format of your fiat money, your paper money in digital formats.
Why this sudden interest in this type of currency?
Well, the central bank has not expressly said why the sudden interest in this type of currency. But if you look at what is happening globally, right, you see the global system of practice when it comes to money, a lot has changed. Right? If you trace this move by the central bank, one of the things that Nigerians don't know is that the central bank has been experimenting on these things since 2017, like they told us, because recently we had a stakeholders engagement with the central bank on CBDC. So they say they have been experimenting on this since 2017. And it's very interesting to note that 2017 was the same year the central bank said that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are not legal tender, they are risky, and anyone who is doing so at their own risk. And then earlier this year also, the central bank came out with a statement to banks to tell all commercial deposit banks not to offer financial transactions to organizations and individuals that deal on cryptocurrency. And in this same year, the central bank is launching its own CBDC. But that's on one side. But look at the bright side of what the CBDC is going to do for the government. Because one, there is so much money being spent to make money. It doesn't make sense to me that you have to spend money to produce money. So with the CBDC, all of those money that is being spent to all those costs, you call it cost, right? But it is money being spent to produce money. It doesn't make sense. So the CBDC is going to do away with that, right? Another thing that we also look at is the fact that the CBDC is going to help with financial inclusion. Right, because right now people will be able to operate a bank account just via their mobile phone. Because what the central bank, as the CBDC is rightly said to be, is to bank all of the citizenry. You know, so what it means is that everybody, every single Nigerian is going to have access to banking. Now, this will also help the central bank in tax remittance because, I mean, everybody is now under the central bank, you know, but that also raises some issues and questions about privacy, because when the monetary and financial system is under the control of the states right now, people are concerned as to their privacy and security also, you know. But another thing that we also look at from what the central bank explained to us during the stakeholders engagement we had with them, they said the CBDC by the Central Bank of Nigeria is going to be built on a blockchain. Now, we don't know if it's going to be a public blockchain or a private blockchain like we know, right? But they said it's going to be on a blockchain. Then another thing is that it's a hybrid system, because the central bank is going to have the wholesale aspect of the CBDC, which is to deal with the banks directly, and the retail aspect of the CBDC, which is dealing with the users directly. So now, if the central bank is dealing with the users directly, and the banks are also having access to CBDC, now we are concerned, is the central bank now in direct competition with the commercial banks, or is there new rules that are going to be re-specified? You know, because if the central bank is not responsible for offering financial transactions or services to private individuals, but with the kind of CBDC that the Central Bank of Nigeria has designed, they are going to be offering the retail service to users, you know. So this raises a question of concern, right? And if everything goes digital with the CBDC, what happens to the guys who are tellers in the banks? It is a sure sign that jobs are going to be lost, you know. So all of this innovation about the CBDC has its pros and its cons, and it's something that we are yet to see unravel. Like the central bank has said, they are launching on the 1st of October. So we are keenly waiting for the 1st of October, but so many questions still is yet to be answered concerning the CBDC and all of the motives and the modus operandi of this system.
All right, then, Mr. Obinna, you know, you said a lot there. Thank you for sharing some thoughts on that with us on our Africa Tech segment.
Thank you so much.
And finally on the program, 70 years ago, on July the 28th, the Refugee Convention was born, a key international treaty establishing the rights of people forced to flee and the emergence of the UN Refugee Agency to protect those rights. 26 million global refugees later, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Filippo Grandi, says the convention continues to protect the rights of refugees across the world. At an event commemorating commemorating its platinum anniversary in Lagos, the UNHCR, alongside its partners, acknowledged that more work still needs to be done.
And Africa. And the numbers of those in need.
It's been 70 years of successes and challenges for an agency set up to meet the needs of the casualties of Europe's wars, but that has expanded since the Second World War to reach almost every nation in the world.
When I started working for UNHCR over 20 years ago, the number of refugees in the world was actually decreasing. And I was thinking, maybe someday there won't be any more refugees in the world. Maybe I can go home and find another job. But fast forward to the Arab Spring and the rise of repressive governments in the world, Syria, millions displaced internally or crossing the borders into Turkey. I think Turkey is the largest refugee hosting country in the world now. Jordan, Greece, and further beyond in Europe.
This event in Lagos, small as it may be because of COVID-19 protocols, is one of the many held around the world to mark the anniversary of the 1951 convention.
Here in Lagos Island.
Later, a panel of discussants take on a review of the agency's roles and domestication of it in Nigeria.
Our experience in Nigeria has not been very, very rosy when it comes to the protection of the rights of refugees. Because the law has been domesticated, Nigerian courts do not hesitate to ensure that justice is meted out to victims of persecution, political persecution.
Civil society and humanitarian organizations are present here. As founder Wellbeing Foundation, Mrs. Bukola Saraki speaks on the importance of philanthropy in helping refugees resettle.
The world of philanthropy today looks at a situation, looks at where government may wish to go, but does not have the swiftness or the agility or the nimbleness to help. And we can study that data, design a program, put our own money where our mouth is, not because we want to do a permanent solution, but because we want to bring out a best practice model that government can later look at and adopt. So in doing so, we're actually being able to move quite quickly to manage traumas correctly and to minimize further displacement, further infringement of rights, and try to advocate for all the sectors to take the right actions.
While Lagos State Government and Nigeria pride itself as welcoming refugees, those at the event speak their mind. It's one of making new friends and still facing challenges. The UNHCR says it continues to support the Nigerian government and partners with civil society organizations in establishing response platforms. As long as there's a need, they will be here for Nigeria.